The bustling cafe on Fifth Avenue pulsed with the rhythm of New York City. John Alvarez, a man in his mid-40s with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes, had been nursing the same cup of coffee for over an hour. He had been lost in thought, his mind wandering through the labyrinth of his past decisions, when a familiar laugh cut through the ambient noise. His head snapped up, eyes searching for the source of that achingly familiar sound. There, just a few tables away, sat Anna, his Anna, the woman he had left behind 15 years ago. She looked different, yet somehow the same. Her dark hair was shorter now, elegantly framing a face that had aged gracefully. But it was her eyes that caught his attention. They still sparkled with the same vitality he had fallen in love with all those years ago. As John stared, transfixed, his mind catapulted back to that fateful night 15 years earlier. The shouting, the accusations, the slamming doors, it all came rushing back with startling clarity. He had been so certain then, so convinced of his righteousness. Now looking at Anna, doubt crept in like a slow poison. But it was not Anna alone that held John's attention. Sitting across from her was a young girl, perhaps 14 or 15 years old. The resemblance was unmistakable. The girl had Anna's delicate features, but her eyes— John felt his breath catch in his throat. Those were his eyes staring back at him from a face that was hauntingly familiar yet entirely unknown. Questions raced through John's mind. Who was this girl? Could she be? No, it was impossible. He had left before, hadn't he? The timeline in his head began to blur, memories shifting and realigning themselves in light of this new information. John's hand tightened around his coffee cup, the ceramic cool against his suddenly clammy palm. Should he approach them? What would he say after all these years? The urge to stand up, to walk over and demand answers, warred with the paralyzing fear of disrupting the life he had so carefully reconstructed in Anna's absence. The cafe around him seemed to fade away, the chatter of patrons and the clink of cutlery becoming a distant hum. In his mind, John could hear his own ragged breathing, could feel the rapid tattoo of his heart against his ribs. Time seemed to stretch and warp, each second lasting an eternity as he wrestled with his decision. Anna laughed again, the sound both achingly familiar and painfully foreign. John watched as she reached across the table, her hand gently squeezing the girl's arm. The gesture was so intimate, so maternal, that John felt like an intruder merely by witnessing it. As he sat there, frozen in indecision, John realized that this moment, this chance encounter, had the power to unravel everything. The carefully constructed narrative of his life, the justifications he had clung to for 15 years, all of it teetered on the edge of a precipice. One move, one word, could send it all tumbling down into an abyss of uncertainty. The girl said something, her words lost in the din of the cafe, but her expression was clear, a mixture of affection and exasperation that John recognized all too well. It was the same look he had often given his own parents in his youth. The realization hit him like a physical blow, driving the air from his lungs. John's coffee had long since gone cold, forgotten in the wake of this earth-shattering revelation. He remained rooted to his seat, a maelstrom of emotions raging within him, as the seconds ticked by and the opportunity to act slipped through his fingers like sand. As Anna and the young girl rose from their table, John found himself moving on autopilot. He tossed a crumpled bill onto the table, grabbed his jacket, and followed them out of the cafe. The crisp autumn air hit him like a slap, momentarily clearing the fog of confusion that had settled over his mind. John trailed behind them at a safe distance, his heart pounding with each step. The girl's laughter floated back to him, painfully reminiscent of Anna's. As they walked, the bustling New York streets faded away, replaced by vivid memories of a lifelong past. Suddenly, John was transported back to their first apartment, a cramped studio with peeling wallpaper and a temperamental radiator. He could almost smell the cheap takeout they had subsisted on, could almost feel the warmth of Anna's body pressed against his as they huddled for warmth on cold winter nights. The memory was so visceral that for a moment, John forgot to breathe. Another step, another memory. Their wedding day, Anna radiant in a simple white dress, her eyes shining with a love so pure it had terrified him. He had promised her forever that day, had meant it with every fiber of his being. How quickly forever had crumbled. John shook his head, trying to dispel the ghosts of the past. He focused on Anna and the girl ahead of him, noting how Anna's hand rested protectively on the girl's shoulder. A gesture so natural, so maternal, it made his chest ache with a longing he had not allowed himself to feel in years. As they waited at a crosswalk, John edged closer, straining to hear their conversation. The girl's voice carried on the wind, clear and bright. "Mom, can we get ice cream?" The word "mom" hit John like a physical blow. He stumbled, nearly colliding with a hurried businessman. The man shot him an irritated glare, but John barely noticed. His mind was reeling, grappling with the implications of what he had just heard. The light changed, and Anna and the girl crossed the street. John followed, his feet moving of their own accord. He was no longer seeing the present, but rather a montage of what-ifs and might-have-beens. Birthdays he had missed, school plays he had never attended, first days and scraped knees and midnight fevers he had not been there to soothe. John's vision blurred, and he realized with a start that tears were streaming down his face. He wiped them away roughly, angry at his own weakness. He had made his choice 15 years ago. He had no right to mourn the life he had willingly abandoned. And yet, as he watched Anna and the girl disappear into a brownstone up ahead, John could not shake the feeling that he had made a terrible mistake. The life he had built for himself in the wake of their separation suddenly seemed hollow, a poor substitute for the family he might have had. John stood on the sidewalk, staring at the door long after it had closed behind them. The sounds of the city faded to a dull roar in his ears. He was adrift in a sea of regret and confusion, clinging to the wreckage of his certainties. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the street, John finally turned away. He had come seeking answers, but had only found more questions. Who was this girl who called Anna Mom? Why had Anna never reached out to him? And most pressingly, what was he going to do now? John walked away, his steps heavy with the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future. The ghosts of what might have been trailed behind him, whispering of lost opportunities and roads not taken. As night fell over the city, John realized that the life he had so carefully constructed over the past 15 years had been built on a foundation of sand. And now, with a single chance encounter, it was all threatening to come crashing down around him. The dim light of John's apartment cast long shadows across the room as he paced restlessly. His mind, a tumultuous sea of memories and doubts, kept returning to that fateful night 15 years ago. The scene played out before him with startling clarity, as if it had happened only yesterday. He had returned home early from a business trip, a bouquet of Anna's favorite lilies in hand. The apartment had been quiet, too quiet. Then he had heard it, a low murmur of voices from their bedroom. John's hand tightened on the doorknob, his knuckles white with tension. When he had burst in, he had found Anna sitting on the bed, her face tear-stained, a man's jacket draped over the chair beside her. The memory of his rage, his hurt, his absolute certainty of Anna's betrayal washed over John anew. He had not waited for explanations, had not given Anna a chance to defend herself. He had simply walked out, slamming the door on their life together. Now, with the perspective of years and the shock of seeing Anna with a teenage girl who could only be their daughter, John found himself questioning everything he had believed to be true. Had he jumped to conclusions? Had he allowed his insecurities and fears to destroy the best thing in his life? John's reflection stared back at him from the window, his face etched with lines of worry and indecision. The city lights twinkled beyond, indifferent to his inner turmoil. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass, his breath fogging the pain. The question that had been gnawing at him since he had seen Anna and the girl in the cafe resurfaced. Should he confront Anna? The desire for answers burned within him, a fire that threatened to consume everything in its path. Yet, fear held him back. Fear of the truth, fear of the consequences, fear of shattering the fragile peace he had managed to construct in the wake of their separation. John's heart raced, its frantic rhythm echoing in his ears. He could almost hear it, a staccato beat underlining the urgency of his decision. What right did he have to disrupt Anna's life, to potentially upend the world of a child who had grown up without him? But then, what right did Anna have to keep his own flesh and blood from him, if indeed the girl was his daughter. He moved to his desk, pulling out a pen and paper. His hand trembled slightly as he began to write, rehearsing what he might say to Anna if he decided to confront her. Words of apology, of anger, of confusion flowed from his pen, a jumbled mess of emotions that mirrored the chaos in his mind. As the night wore on, John found himself no closer to a decision. The weight of the past 15 years pressed down on him, a burden he had carried for so long he had almost forgotten it was there. Now, it threatened to crush him entirely. Outside, the city began to stir, the first hints of dawn painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. John watched the sunrise, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, his mind still racing. He knew that whatever decision he made would irrevocably change the course of his life, and potentially the lives of Anna and the girl. The chirping of his phone startled John out of his reverie. A reminder popped up on the screen. A meeting he had scheduled months ago, suddenly insignificant in the face of his current dilemma. He stared at the phone, an idea forming in his mind. Perhaps there was a way to get some answers without immediately confronting Anna. With trembling fingers, John opened his browser and began to search. If Anna and the girl lived in the city, there had to be some trace of them online. School records, social media profiles, anything that might give him a clue about their lives over the past 15 years. As he typed, John knew he was crossing a line. This was an invasion of privacy, a desperate act born of confusion and longing. But he could not stop himself. The need to know, to understand, had become all-consuming. Whatever the consequences, whatever truths he might uncover, John knew he had to see this through to the end. The sun climbed higher in the sky as John delved deeper into his search, unaware that with each click, he was setting in motion a chain of events that would change everything he thought he knew about his past, present, and future.
Hey there, enjoying the story? Subscribe now, like and comment to catch all the upcoming emotions.
The autumn sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk as John stood outside the brownstone, his heart pounding in his chest. He had spent days agonizing over this moment, rehearsing what he would say, imagining every possible scenario. Now that he was here, all his carefully prepared words seemed to evaporate, leaving him with nothing but raw, unfiltered emotion. John's finger hovered over the doorbell, trembling slightly. He took a deep breath, steeling himself, and pressed it. The sound echoed inside the house, each second of silence that followed stretching into an eternity. Then the door opened. Anna stood there, her eyes widening in shock as she recognized him. The years had been kind to her, John thought fleetingly. Her dark hair was shorter now, streaked with elegant strands of silver, but her eyes were as captivating as ever. "John?" Anna's voice was barely above a whisper, a mixture of disbelief and something else, fear, perhaps. Before John could respond, a voice called out from inside the house. "Mom? Who is it?" The girl, Olivia, John had learned from his online searches, appeared behind Anna, her curious gaze shifting between the two adults. The resemblance was even more striking up close, and John felt his breath catch in his throat. Anna's posture changed instantly, her body angling to partially shield Olivia from view. The protective gesture was not lost on John, and he felt a pang of both admiration and jealousy. "Anna, we need to talk," John said, his voice hoarse with emotion. Anna's eyes darted nervously to Olivia, then back to John. "This is not a good time," she said, her tone clipped. John took a step forward, desperation creeping into his voice. "Please, Anna, I just want answers." The tension in the air was palpable, crackling like electricity. Olivia looked confused, her brow furrowed as she tried to make sense of the situation. "Mom?" Olivia's voice was uncertain, tinged with worry. Anna's face was a mask of conflicting emotions, fear, anger, and something that looked almost like guilt. She turned to Olivia, her voice softening. "Honey, can you go to your room for a bit? I need to speak with an old friend." Olivia hesitated, her eyes darting between Anna and John. Reluctantly, she retreated into the house, leaving Anna and John alone in the tense silence. Anna stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind her. Her eyes met John's, and for a moment he saw a flicker of the woman he had loved so deeply all those years ago. "Why are you here, John?" Anna's voice was low, controlled, but John could hear the undercurrent of emotion. John took a deep breath. "I saw you and Olivia at the cafe. I need to know, Anna." Is she mine? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with 15 years of unspoken words and buried truths. Anna's face paled, her hands clenching at her sides. "You have no right to ask that," she said, her voice trembling with suppressed anger. "You lost that right when you walked out on us." John felt a surge of frustration. "I walked out because I thought you had betrayed me. You never tried to explain, never tried to find me." "Find you?" Anna's laugh was bitter. "You made it clear you wanted nothing to do with me. And by the time I realized..." She trailed off, her eyes flickering towards the closed door. The silence that followed was deafening. John's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of information, the years of misunderstanding and hurt. "Anna, please," he said, his voice softening. "I just want to understand what happened." For a moment, it seemed like Anna might relent. Her shoulders sagged, and John saw a flash of the pain she'd been carrying all these years. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the vulnerability vanished, replaced by a steely resolve. "It's too late, John," Anna said, her voice firm. "Whatever you think you're looking for, whatever answers you want, they won't change anything. We've both moved on. Leave us alone." With that, Anna turned and reached for the door handle. John, desperate, reached out to stop her. "Anna, wait." Anna flinched at his touch, whirling around with fire in her eyes. "No, John, you don't get to come back after 15 years and demand explanations. You made your choice. Now live with it." The door closed with a finality that echoed in John's chest. He stood there, stunned, as the sound of Anna's footsteps faded away inside the house. The confrontation had left him with more questions than answers, and a gnawing sense that he had only scratched the surface of a truth far more complex and painful than he had imagined. As John turned to leave, his mind reeling from the encounter, he caught a glimpse of movement in an upstairs window. Olivia stood there, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Their eyes met for a brief moment before she disappeared from view, leaving John with the unsettling feeling that his life and the lives of Anna and Olivia would never be the same again. The soft glow of the computer screen illuminated John's haggard face as he delved deeper into his investigation. Days had passed since his confrontation with Anna, but her words and the image of Olivia watching from the window haunted him relentlessly. Sleep had become a luxury he could no longer afford as he pursued every lead, no matter how tenuous. John's fingers flew across the keyboard, scouring social media profiles, public records, and any scrap of information he could find about Anna and Olivia's life over the past 15 years. Each discovery was a piece of a puzzle he couldn't quite solve, a fragment of a life he should have been part of. He found Olivia's school records, noting with a mixture of pride and regret her excellent grades and involvement in the debate team. A photo of her winning a science fair competition made his chest tighten with emotion. Her smile, so reminiscent of Anna's, seemed to mock him from the screen. As John dug deeper, he uncovered more unsettling details. There were gaps in Anna's employment history, periods of time unaccounted for. Medical records hinted at a hospitalization around the time Olivia would have been born, but the details were frustratingly vague. The more John uncovered, the more questions arose. Why had Anna changed jobs so frequently in the years following their separation? What was the nature of her hospitalization? And most pressingly, why did Olivia's birth certificate list her father as unknown? Driven by a desperate need for answers, John had reached out to old mutual friends, carefully probing for information. Most had been reluctant to speak, their loyalty to Anna evident in their evasive responses. But a few had let slip details that only deepened the mystery. One former colleague, after several drinks, had mentioned something about Anna disappearing for a while shortly after John had left. Another hinted at a difficult time Anna had gone through, but clammed up when pressed for details. The pieces refused to fit together, forming a disjointed picture that made less sense the more John stared at it. He rubbed his tired eyes, the strain of days of intense focus taking its toll. The room around him, once meticulously organized, had descended into chaos, mirroring the tumult of his mind. Scattered across his desk were printouts of social media posts, school newsletters, and public records. A corkboard on the wall was covered in a web of red string connecting photos, dates, and scribbled notes. To an outsider, It might have looked like the work of a madman, but to John, it was a lifeline to a truth he was determined to uncover. As the investigation consumed him, John found himself constantly comparing the fragments of Anna and Olivia's life to the memories of his own past 15 years. The contrast was stark and painful. While he had buried himself in work, climbing the corporate ladder and amassing wealth but little else, Anna had built a life centered around Olivia. Birthday parties, school events, vacations, all captured in photos that seemed to taunt him with their domestic bliss. Yet beneath the surface of these happy images, John sensed an undercurrent of something darker. There were too many inconsistencies, too many unanswered questions. The Anna he had known would not have kept his child from him without good reason. What had happened in those early years after their separation? What secret was she protecting? As dawn broke on another sleepless night, John found himself staring at a photo of Olivia from a recent school play. The resemblance to himself at that age was undeniable. He traced the line of her jaw, the shape of her eyes, seeing his own features reflected back at him. In that moment, John made a decision. He could not continue this investigation from afar. He needed to get closer, to observe Anna and Olivia in their daily lives. Only then might he uncover the truth that Anna was so desperately trying to hide. With renewed determination, John began to formulate a plan. He would find a way to insert himself into their world, to peel back the layers of secrecy and half-truths. Whatever the cost, whatever the consequences, he would uncover the truth about Olivia's birth and the years that followed. As he closed his laptop and moved to the window, John watched the city come to life below. The early morning light cast long shadows across the streets, a fitting metaphor for the dark secrets he was determined to bring into the light. Little did he know that his pursuit of the truth would set in motion a chain of events that would irrevocably change not only his life, but the lives of Anna and Olivia as well. The soft blue glow of the computer screen illuminated John's face as he stared at Olivia's social media profile. His finger hovered over the mouse, trembling slightly as he debated his next move. The profile was a window into a life he had never known. Photos of Olivia with friends, at school events, on vacations with Anna. Each image was a stark reminder of all he had missed. John's heart raced as he clicked through the photos, drinking in every detail of his daughter's life. Her smile, so much like Anna's, seemed to mock him from the screen. He had found her profile after days of searching, creating fake accounts, and navigating the labyrinthine world of teenage social media. Now that he had found her, he felt paralyzed by the weight of his next decision. The ethical dilemma gnawed at him. Contacting Olivia directly, without Anna's knowledge or consent, felt like crossing a line. He knew it could potentially destroy any chance of reconciliation with Anna, not to mention the psychological impact it might have on Olivia. Yet the fear of losing this opportunity, of allowing more time to slip away, was overwhelming. John's hands shook as he opened a new message window. The cursor blinked accusingly, waiting for words he wasn't sure he had the right to type. He began to write, then deleted, then wrote again. Each attempt felt inadequate, either too revealing or not revealing enough. How does one introduce oneself as a long-lost father to a child who may not even know you exist? The room around John faded away as he focused intensely on the screen. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to grow louder, a reminder of the years that had already passed. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, oblivious to the life-altering moment unfolding in John's apartment. Finally, after what felt like hours, John crafted a message. It was simple, non-threatening, designed to pique Olivia's curiosity without revealing too much. He read it over and over, analyzing each word, imagining how Olivia might interpret it. His finger hovered over the send button, the weight of 15 years of absence pressing down on him. With a deep breath, John clicked send. The soft whoosh of the sent message seemed deafening in the quiet room. Immediately, regret and panic set in. What had he done? How would Olivia react? What if Anna found out? John stood up abruptly, pacing the room, running his hands through his hair. The waiting was excruciating. Every notification sound from his computer made him jump, his heart racing. But none of them were from Olivia. As the hours ticked by, John's anxiety grew. He checked and rechecked the message, confirming it had been sent, wondering if Olivia had seen it. The lack of response was agonizing. Had he made a terrible mistake? Had he irreparably damaged any chance of a relationship with his daughter before it even began? Just as John was about to give up hope, a soft ping emanated from his computer. His heart leapt into his throat as he rushed to the screen. There it was, a response from Olivia. John's hands shook as he opened the message. Olivia's words were cautious, curious, but not outright rejecting. She asked questions. Who was he? How did he know her mother? Why was he reaching out now? Each question was a dagger of guilt, reminding John of his long absence. As John carefully crafted his response, he felt a mix of elation and terror. This was it, the beginning of a conversation that could change everything. He knew he was walking a tightrope. One wrong word, one misstep, and he could lose this tenuous connection forever. The exchange continued, a delicate dance of half-truths and carefully worded responses. John found himself captivated by Olivia's intelligence and wit, seeing echoes of both himself and Anna in her words. With each message, the weight of his absence grew heavier, the realization of all he had missed more acute. As dawn broke, casting long shadows across John's cluttered apartment, he sat back from the computer, exhausted but exhilarated. He had made contact with his daughter. It was a small step, fraught with ethical implications and potential consequences, but it was a step nonetheless. John knew that the road ahead would be difficult. Sooner or later, the truth would have to come out. Anna would discover his deception, and Olivia would learn the full story of her parentage. The fallout could be catastrophic. But as John looked at the messages on his screen, at the words of the daughter he had never known, he felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever came next, whatever price he had to pay for his actions, he knew he could not turn back now. The connection had been made, and John was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the park bench where John sat, his fingers drumming an anxious rhythm on his knee. He had arrived early, his nerves frayed from a sleepless night spent rehearsing what he would say to Olivia.
Hey there, enjoying the story? Subscribe now, like and comment to catch all the upcoming emotions.
The park bustled with life around him, joggers and dog walkers passing by, oblivious to the life-altering encounter about to unfold. When Olivia appeared at the edge of the park, John's breath caught in his throat. Seeing her in person, without the filter of a computer screen or the distance of a casual observation, was overwhelming. She walked with Anna's graceful gait, but her searching gaze was all his own. As she approached, John stood, his legs unsteady beneath him. Their greeting was awkward, a strange dance of near strangers who shared an undeniable connection. Olivia's eyes darted over John's face, searching for familiar features, while John struggled to reconcile the image of the baby he had left behind with the young woman before him. As they sat, the tension between them was palpable. John's carefully prepared words evaporated, leaving him grasping for a way to begin. Olivia, however, wasted no time. Her questions came in a rush, each one hitting John like a physical blow. Who was he really? Why had he contacted her? What was his connection to her mother? John's responses were halting, each word carefully chosen. He revealed fragments of the truth, speaking of his past relationship with Anna, his regret over leaving, his recent discovery of Olivia's existence. But as he spoke, he saw confusion and then disbelief cloud Olivia's eyes. Olivia's version of events, as she began to share it, bore little resemblance to John's memories. She spoke of a father who had abandoned them, of Anna's struggles as a single mother, of a childhood marked by absence. But the details were wrong, the timeline skewed. John listened in growing horror as Olivia recounted a history that seemed to have been carefully constructed to hide a deeper truth. The discrepancies mounted. Olivia mentioned events that John knew couldn't have happened, at least not as she described them. She spoke of attempts at reconciliation that John had no memory of letters and phone calls that had never occurred. With each word, the chasm between their realities grew wider. John's mind raced, trying to reconcile Olivia's story with his own memories. Had Anna lied to Olivia about her past, or was there some truth to this alternate history that he couldn't see? The possibility that his own recollections might be flawed, that he might have misunderstood or misremembered crucial events. left him reeling. As Olivia spoke, her body language shifted. Initial openness gave way to crossed arms and guarded expressions. John recognized his own mannerisms in her defensive posture, a painful reminder of their connection, even as their stories diverged. The silences between revelations grew heavy, laden with unasked questions and unspoken doubts. In these pauses, the ambient sounds of the park seemed to grow louder. Children's laughter, the rustle of leaves, a distant siren. Each noise underscored the unreality of the moment, the stark contrast between the normalcy of the world around them and the upheaval of their personal histories. John struggled to maintain his composure as Olivia's story unfolded. He wanted to interrupt, to correct what he saw as falsehoods, to defend himself against accusations of abandonment and neglect. But he held back, sensing that this moment was crucial, that Olivia needed to speak her truth, however misguided he believed it to be. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, Olivia's words finally slowed. She looked at John with a mixture of confusion, anger, and something that might have been hope. The weight of unresolved questions hung between them, a tangible presence on the bench. John realized, with a sinking feeling, that this encounter had raised far more questions than it had answered. The truth, it seemed, was a shifting, elusive thing, shaped by perspective and time, and perhaps deliberate manipulation. As he looked at Olivia, seeing both himself and Anna reflected in her features, he understood that uncovering the full story would be far more complex and painful than he had imagined. As they parted ways, the distance between them felt both smaller and vastly larger than when they had met. John watched Olivia walk away, her steps quick and purposeful, so like his own. He remained on the bench, the cooling air of evening settling around him, grappling with the realization that in his quest for truth, he had stumbled into a labyrinth of lies and half-truths that threatened to unravel everything he thought he knew about his past, his present, and his future. The evening air hung heavy with anticipation as John stood outside Anna's brownstone, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The street was quiet, the city's usual cacophony muted, as if holding its breath for the confrontation about to unfold. John's hand trembled as he raised it to knock, the weight of Olivia's revelations and his own tumultuous emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Anna's face, when she opened the door, was a mask of wary resignation. She had known this moment would come, had perhaps been dreading it for years. Without a word, she stepped aside, allowing John to enter the home that could have been theirs in another life. The living room was a battlefield of memories and secrets. Family photos adorned the walls, each one a silent witness to the years John had missed. He felt like an intruder in a life that should have included him, his absence palpable in every corner of the room. John's voice, when he finally spoke, was hoarse with emotion. He recounted his meeting with Olivia, the conflicting stories, the years of misunderstandings and half-truths. With each word, Anna's composure cracked, her carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of long-buried truths. Anna's responses came in bursts, alternating between defensive anger and heart-wrenching vulnerability. She spoke of fear, of protection, of choices made in desperation. Each revelation was a seismic shift, reshaping the landscape of their shared past. The truth, when it finally emerged, was more complex and painful than either of them had imagined. Anna revealed the real reason behind their separation, a web of lies and misunderstandings that had spiraled out of control. She spoke of a pregnancy fraught with complications, of medical emergencies, and life-altering decisions made in John's absence. Tears flowed freely as Anna recounted the early years of Olivia's life, the struggles she had faced as a single mother, the choices she had made to protect their daughter from the pain of abandonment. John listened in stunned silence, his own memories shifting and realigning with each new piece of information. The atmosphere in the room grew thick with tension, the air electric with unspoken accusations and long-suppressed emotions. John's anger at being kept in the dark warred with his guilt over leaving, while Anna's protective instincts clashed with her remorse for the deception she had maintained for so long. As the night wore on, their voices rose and fell, accusations gave way to apologies, and long-held grievances were aired and examined in the harsh light of truth. The sound of their confrontation filled the house, a crescendo of emotion that seemed to make the very walls vibrate with its intensity. In the midst of their heated exchange, a door creaked open upstairs. Olivia stood at the top of the stairs, her face a mixture of confusion and dawning comprehension. The sight of her brought John and Anna up short, a stark reminder of the innocent life caught in the crossfire of their past mistakes. The revelation of John's true identity to Olivia was a moment of raw, unscripted emotion. Years of carefully constructed narratives crumbled in the face of the undeniable truth. Olivia's reaction was a storm of conflicting emotions: anger at the deception, relief at finally knowing the truth, fear of what this meant for her future. As the first light of dawn began to seep through the windows, the three of them sat in exhausted silence. The truth had finally been laid bare, but its impact was far from clear. Relationships had been irrevocably altered, trust shattered, and tentatively rebuilt in the span of a single night. John looked at Anna and Olivia, seeing both strangers in the family he had longed for. The path forward was uncertain, fraught with challenges and the potential for more pain. But beneath the exhaustion and lingering tension, there was a glimmer of something else, a fragile hope that perhaps with time and effort, healing might be possible. As they sat there, the first sounds of the awakening city filtering in from outside, John, Anna, and Olivia faced the daunting task of navigating their new reality. The truth had come at a high cost, and the future was far from certain. But for better or worse, the secrets of the past no longer stood between them. What remained was the difficult, messy work of forging a path forward in the light of their shared truth. The days following the explosive confrontation unfolded in a haze of emotional turbulence for John, Anna, and Olivia. The truth, so long buried beneath layers of lies and misunderstandings, had erupted with volcanic force, leaving their lives in disarray. John found himself adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions. The joy of finally knowing his daughter warred with the bitter resentment of lost years. He had taken a leave of absence from work, unable to focus on anything but the seismic shift in his personal life. His apartment, once a sanctuary of ordered solitude, now felt like a prison of regret and missed opportunities. Anna, for her part, grappled with the consequences of her long-held secrets. The carefully constructed life she had built for herself and Olivia seemed to be crumbling around her. Sleepless nights were spent reliving every decision, every lie, every moment that had led to this point. The weight of her choices pressed down on her, a constant, suffocating presence. Olivia, caught in the crossfire of her parents' past, struggled to reconcile the truth with the narrative she had believed her entire life. Her world had been turned upside down, her identity thrown into question. She vacillated between anger at the deception and a desperate longing to understand the complex history that had shaped her existence. The brownstone, once a haven of familial warmth, now echoed with tense silences and muffled arguments. Anna and Olivia's relationship, previously a bastion of trust and openness, had become strained. Every conversation was a minefield of potential triggers, each word carefully weighed for its emotional impact. John's attempts to connect with Olivia were fraught with awkwardness and unspoken resentments. Their interactions were stilted, burdened by the weight of lost time and shattered expectations. Olivia's responses to John's overtures alternated between cautious curiosity and defensive withdrawal. The outside world continued its relentless pace, oblivious to the private drama unfolding within the confines of their interconnected lives. Friends and colleagues noticed the changes: John's distraction, Anna's withdrawn demeanor, Olivia's uncharacteristic mood swings, but few could fathom the depth of the upheaval they were experiencing. As the initial shock began to wear off, new conflicts emerged. John, emboldened by the revelation of his paternity, began to assert his rights as a father. His demands for time with Olivia and input into her life clashed with Anna's instincts to protect the daughter she had raised alone. Olivia, torn between her lifelong bond with her mother and her newfound connection to her father, felt pulled in opposing directions. Legal considerations loomed on the horizon. John had consulted a lawyer, exploring his options for establishing paternal rights. Anna, feeling threatened, had responded in kind. The specter of a custody battle hung over them, a nuclear option that could destroy any hope of reconciliation. Amidst the turmoil, moments of connection flickered like fragile flames. A shared laugh over a childhood photo, a brief touch of comfort during a particularly difficult conversation, a glimpse of understanding in eyes brimming with unshed tears. These moments were rare and fleeting, but they hinted at the possibility of healing, however distant it might seem. As weeks passed, the initial shock gave way to a grinding, day-to-day struggle to navigate their new reality. Old routines were disrupted, new boundaries were tentatively established and then challenged. Every interaction was charged with the potential for conflict or breakthrough. The emotional toll was evident in their physical appearances. John's hair had grayed noticeably, deep lines etched around his eyes. Ana's usual, impeccable presentation had given way to a haggard wariness. Olivia's youthful vibrancy had dimmed, replaced by a guarded wariness beyond her years. Yet beneath the pain and confusion, a subtle shift was occurring. The truth, painful as it was, had cleared the air of long-held secrets. As they grappled with the fallout, each of them began to see the others not as villains or victims, but as flawed, complex individuals shaped by circumstances and choices. The path forward remained unclear, fraught with potential pitfalls and unresolved issues. But as John, Ana, and Olivia faced the consequences of their shared past, they were beginning to realize that their futures, for better or worse, were inextricably linked. The real work of healing, of forging new relationships from the ashes of old deceptions, lay ahead. A daunting challenge that would test the limits of their resilience, forgiveness, and capacity for love. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the park as John, Ana, and Olivia gathered on a secluded bench. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of change. This meeting, arranged after weeks of individual therapy sessions and cautious text exchanges, held the weight of their collective futures. As they settled onto the bench, the tension was palpable. John's hands fidgeted nervously, while Ana's posture remained rigid. Olivia, seated between them, seemed both a bridge and a barrier. The sounds of the city faded into the background, leaving them in a bubble of anticipation. Ana was the first to break the silence.
Hey there, enjoying the story? Subscribe now, like and comment to catch all the upcoming emotions.
Her voice, though hesitant, carried a strength that had been absent in their previous encounters. She spoke of regret, of fear, and of the love that had driven her decisions, however misguided they might have been. As she talked, the rigid set of her shoulders began to soften, the burden of secrets finally lifting. John listened intently, his expression a mix of pain and understanding. When it was his turn to speak, his words were measured, carefully chosen. He acknowledged his own role in their shared tragedy, his hasty departure, his failure to seek the truth, the years wasted in bitter resentment. As he spoke, the lines of tension around his eyes began to ease, replaced by a cautious hope. Olivia, who had remained silent, her gaze fixed on the ground, finally raised her head. Her words, when they came, were raw with emotion. She spoke of betrayal, of confusion, but also of a desperate desire to understand and to be understood. As she talked, tears flowed freely, years of pent-up emotions finally finding release. The conversation ebbed and flowed, punctuated by moments of painful honesty and tentative forgiveness. Old wounds were reopened, examined under the harsh light of truth, and slowly, painfully, began to heal. The full story of their shared past emerged, piece by piece, until it lay bare before them, no longer a source of division, but a shared history to be acknowledged and perhaps one day accepted. As the afternoon wore on, subtle shifts began to occur. Ana's hand, resting on the bench, inched closer to John's. Olivia's posture relaxed, her body language opening up. John's voice lost its defensive edge, softening as he spoke of his hopes for the future. The path forward, they realized, would not be easy. Trust, once shattered, could not be instantly restored. Relationships, long defined by absence and deception, would need to be rebuilt from the ground up. But in that moment, sitting together under the canopy of autumn leaves, a fragile sense of possibility began to take root. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, John, Ana, and Olivia rose from the bench. Their movements were tentative, as if testing the stability of this newfound understanding. Ana's hand brushed against John's arm, a gesture of reconciliation that spoke volumes. Olivia, caught between them, allowed herself to be drawn into a loose embrace. They parted ways as the streetlights flickered to life, each returning to their separate lives, but carrying with them the seeds of a shared future. The wounds of the past had not been erased, but they had been acknowledged, examined, and in that acknowledgement lay the possibility of healing. John walked back to his apartment, his steps lighter than they had been in weeks. The city around him seemed different somehow, full of potential he had not noticed before. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, filled with difficult conversations and painful adjustments. But for the first time in 15 years, he felt a sense of purpose, a connection to something larger than himself. Anna returned to the brownstone, her mind already racing with the practical considerations of their new reality. There would be legal matters to address, schedules to negotiate, boundaries to establish. But beneath the logistical concerns, a small flame of hope had been kindled. The burden of secrets she had carried for so long had been lifted, and in its place was a cautious optimism for the future. Olivia made her way to a friend's house, her emotions a complex tangle of relief, uncertainty, and tentative hope. Her world had been irrevocably changed, her understanding of family and identity fundamentally altered. Yet as she walked, she felt a strange sense of liberation. The truth, painful as it had been, had set her free to forge her own path, to define her relationships on her own terms. As night fell over the city, John, Anna, and Olivia each found themselves looking up at the same star-filled sky. The future remained uncertain, the path forward unclear. But in the wake of truth and forgiveness, a new chapter had begun. It was a chapter that would be written not in isolation, but together, with all the complexity, pain, and potential for joy that entailed. The story of their family, long fragmented by secrets and misunderstandings, had not ended. Instead, it had taken an unexpected turn, opening up possibilities that none of them could have imagined just months before.